What I would just like to suggest here is that helping people is fantastic in life, but helping is only ever really going to happen in the context of a relationship. Relationships are always going to be built and based upon trust. Trust is developed over time. So until a person knows and is able to see that we as helpers are 100% there for them in a helping capacity, then they might be a little bit hesitant to let us in. And by this, what I mean is that if we are experiencing any resistance from those people whom we're attempting to help, it's just simply because the depth of trust that they need to have in place hasn't yet been developed. So helping people isn't just about the skills or the questions or the processes, it's also to do with our observational skills, because sometimes we need to be able to see and recognize and discern where a person is actually at with us. Gerard.
All right. By the way, these 4 questions, I sometimes refer to them as the geography of helping. The framework provides a map, as it were, of helping. So no matter what the client says, I know where he or she is in the geography of helping. And I move with the client. Sometimes the client needs to move ahead to the next question. Sometimes the client needs to move back, and I'm there to help, not to impose a geography, but to help use the geography to help the client manage the problem or identify and exploit the opportunity.
And that's something I would just definitely like to just unpack just a little bit here to compliment you, Jerry. I can remember when I was serving in the British Army, going back around about 20 years ago now, one of my weaknesses, or I'm going to say weaknesses, it definitely wasn't one of my strengths, was map reading. I can remember getting sent to the hills up in Sennybridge in Wales with a map and a compass. Back then, we didn't have GPSs or mobile phones or anything like this. And I absolutely sucked. I can remember getting stranded up in the hills for around about 24 hours longer than what I actually...
But you made it out.
I did make it out, and the reason why I made it out was because I managed to partner up with someone who was particularly good at map reading. Someone who was a lot better at map reading than I. All right? So what I'm suggesting here is that this is kind of the attitude and the kind of idea we want to be getting our heads around in terms of helping other people. If we want to help people, we can only help other people in areas of our lives that we first helped ourselves. For example, I cannot teach you to be a better map reader if I myself suck at map reading. Now, this might seem like a really simple idea, but it's one that many helping practitioners and professionals fail miserably at. They have a lot of information.
Well, you bring up an important point. If I, as a helper, however informal my helping is, and I am not using this process on myself, then I don't, as it were, merit to try to help somebody else.
If you cannot explain to me how it is that you're applying a principle or an idea that you're sharing with me, then I couldn't possibly trust you.
Yes, well, all right.
And this brings us back to the trust idea. So anyway, we've looked at identifying a problem. We've also looked at this second aspect, which is identifying what it is that the person whom we're helping actually wants, or what we ourselves actually want.
And that brings us to number 3.
It certainly does.
And number 3 is, how do I get what I want?
Practically, how do I get
what do I have to do? For instance, take the marriage couple. So they reluctantly talked about John and Jane and what they saw as reasonable or useful in John and Jane's marriage. I said, well, is that what you want? Yes. I said, would your life be any better if it was like that? Not because it's John and Jane, but that the behaviors you're talking about with it. For instance, John and Jane were pretty good at both making financial decisions. They said, yes, it would be. I said, well, what do you need to do to get there? This is not copying John and Jane. What's your version of this in your marriage?
Modeling. It's about extracting what works. It's not about copying. Now, granted, some people will try to copy. Copying doesn't work. Modeling is very, very different. To just build upon what you're sharing here, Jerry, a few years ago, and I'm sure we might even invite Karen to join us at some point later in the course, especially when it comes to communication skills. A few years ago in mine and Karen's marriage, we reached the stage of crisis. We'd been married for around about 3 years. And what we found was we both committed to the marriage. We wanted to be married. We wanted to be a good team, but neither of us were complementing each other. My approach to life is 1,000,000 miles an hour. I go very, very fast. Karen's approach to life is a little bit slower, where I was focused on developing myself, growing myself as an individual, improving myself, helping others. I actually hadn't included Karen on the journey with me.
Yes.
So I just simply hadn't stopped to take stock of where Karen was at on her journey. So in the context of our marriage, I was committed to running 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I was used to that. I could run really, really fast, but Karen wasn't used to going that pace. And this is what actually brought crisis into our relationship, this divide that kind of came between us.
I am convinced, for instance, if you look at those 4 questions, what's going on? Second, what do we want instead of what we've got? 3, what do we need to do to get there? And 4, implementation looks like an afterthought almost. Mm-hmm. I think implementation begins day 1.
Yeah.
That is, if you begin to identify some issues, there are some small actions that you can take right at the beginning to do something about this problem situation. It might be a very small type of action, that's okay. For instance, the married couple agreed to, they thought maybe reviewing the way they went at finances was a first step, and they were taking that step in a very gingerly way. But if they did nothing between session 1 and session 2, then there was something wrong with session 1.
Now, it's interesting you say that, because when me and Karen reached this stage of crisis inside of our marriage, we'd identified there was a problem, we'd identified there was this huge gap, we knew that something needed to change, we both knew what we both wanted, but up until that point, neither of us had committed to doing anything about it.
Right. Well, commitment, yes, commitment. In fact, question 3, what do we want instead of what we've got? Once you identify it, you should also answer the question, what are we willing to do to get there? Mm-hmm. How important is what we've chosen to us to make some kind of real impact on our lives?
And make an impact. I'm guessing that none of us are ever really going to be content with where we're at in life, because none of us are perfect. We're all flawed. We're all imperfect in every single way. We all have room for improvement in our communications, in our careers, in our relationships. We all have room for improvement, full stop. But unless we are taking practical steps on a day-to-day basis towards pursuing those things that we actually want more of in life, then we're never going to have any more in our lives than what we've ever historically had. There's a big, big difference between nice ideas and an impact, i.e. change actually occurring.
Yeah, because without 4, 1, 2, and 3 could be renamed blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, I think that happens often. It happens not just with individuals, it's happened with organizations. The assumption, somebody did some statistics on organizations, for instance, and when they came up with all sorts of plans to become a better type of enterprise. Mm-hmm. 80% of them never got there.